Hi guys, welcome back to episode 2. In this episode, I'll attempt to complete the Spirits of the Elid quest, which will give us access to trout and salmon. In the next few episodes, I will be attempting some very difficult combat situations for my level, and 300 HP heals from shrimp just aren't going to cut it. So here's my first of many Slayer levels coming in. It's going to be a long grind to 115. As you'll soon find, I have the attention span of a squirrel, so the following clips will be very diverse. When I was in the mood, I'd throw in a few divination caches, as I can't actively train this skill until I get access to brilliant energy at level 80. I don't have any active divinations goals at this time, but it's going to take a while to get there with a limit of 2 caches daily. Most of the training in this episode will be combat related, working on upgrading my gear and constitution levels so I can't get one hit by a camel. I'm continuing my murderous rampage of Al-Kharid men, which provide around 15k XP an hour, bearing their bones as I went. I use Zeke's superior scimitars to upgrade my weapons, and Louis' armored legs bazaar for my armor. Melee was the best choice for early combat as it provided a cheap upgrade system. I will have access to several very high level mage weapons later, but the early game was looking a little thin as you'll later see. Fishing training was locked to the river west of Al-Kharid, catching shrimp and sardines to 20 and 30 fishing for trout and salmon. Magic training was going to be very difficult, as I do not yet have access to a dependable source of runes. Requiring 37 for the quest, I was forced to use my Staff of Air for all training. I did have access to auras thanks to the Premier Club loyalty boost, and I did unlock higher level air spells, but accuracy and damage were always limited to my tier 1 weapon. Throughout this grind, I made sure to pick up as many herbs as possible, especially guams. I found that the Polypore dungeon provided a great source of low-level herblore training, but I needed 3 herblore for this method, and cleaning grimy guams was my only option. I found that the dungeon would provide some nice magic training as well, as all creatures here are weak to magic. That being said, most of the creatures require Slayer levels exceeding level 80, so I would be limited to fungal rodents and infested axes for the time being. My accuracy was still pretty low, but popping a maniacal seemed to cover up the difference. I used a charge bow for the bulk of my ranged training. I also needed 37 range for the quest, all in an effort to shoot 1 arrow. Glad I'm utilizing my skills to the fullest potential. I faced the same issues here as I did with magic, having all of my accuracy and damage capped at the tier 1 of my weapon. But after several hours of grinding on men, I reached the required level, along with 3 herblore shortly after. Now we'll talk about my master strategy for herblore. All NPCs in the Polypore dungeon drop neem drupes when they are defeated, which can be squeezed into a jug and used to counteract the toxic effects of the creatures. However, whenever you use the neem oil on a creature, you gain roughly 6 herblore XP, resulting in some great rates early on. Neem oil also has a drop table when used, providing the only source of Eyes of Newt in the entire desert, making training on attack potions unfeasible. I also realized that access to vials was going to be an issue, as only a few NPCs drop them, and there's only a 20 vial stock in the Polypore dungeon. I did come up with a much better strategy. Comment if you can predict what it is. That being said, I had enough vials and limpwort roots to get a few herblore levels from traditional training. The next few clips shows various training for level requirements. I did a little thieving on Al-Kharid men to get 21 for pyramid plunder. I also mined some copper and tin, and later iron, in the Al-Kharid mine. Keep in mind, this occurred before the mining and smithing rework. This method would have been much worse if it were after. I used the 50% porter chance from the premier artifact daily to make my training more efficient. I continued to work on combat training, eventually switching to Al-Kharid guards, as they provided a decent increase to XP rates and access to better herb crops. At each 10 level milestone, I upgraded my weapons to the next tier, selling all of my drops to the general store to fund these upgrades. Scarabs also quickly became my sole moneymaker on this account, giving access to a somewhat uncommon 80k GP drop. After cooking all the shrimp and sardines that I caught on my grind to 30 fishing, I was able to achieve 30 cooking, the level requirement to cook salmon. helpful for when we finish the quest. Another divination cache coming in, along with a piece of the diviner's outfit, slowly completing the full set. I would soon get 40 attack and upgrade to adamant scimitars, the best weapons that I can purchase in the desert. With all of this killing, I discovered the magic of kebabs. Their spicy goodness provides great RNG healing, sometimes providing more health per slot than salmon, but their unpredictable nature suggests that they would not be a good, consistent food source, and the quest was continued. I started working on some requirements for Ichthurin's Little Helper, namely 30 woodcutting for a willow log. Early woodcutting training was limited to the 3 trees north of the mage training arena, requiring world hops following their clearance. I found Ashara, the corrupted scorpion pet, during one of my scarab grinds, which was a nice little surprise. First pet unlock on this account. Pyramid Plunder also proved to be one of the best sources of thieving XP, ever increasing every 10 levels up to 91. It also gives access to the Pharaoh's Scepter at 1 in 1,000 drop rate from chests. This would provide some nice teleports, but I can't complete the hard diaries for the boosted charge count, so it would not be very functional. I might consider grinding for the Scepter of the Gods in the future, but 75 rune crafting will be annoying to achieve. Locusts and Sophonim proved to be a dramatic upgrade to combat XP rates, increasing to upwards of 30k XP an hour, along with dropping a food source that did not require cooking. This provided a very sustainable method of combat training. Some higher smithing levels provided minor gear upgrades, namely an iron chain body and an iron full helm. I also started to smith some iron arrowheads for fletching training later on. I went ahead and upgraded to mithril plate legs in Al Kharid. I decided that I would eventually need an upgraded non-melee weapon, and the discovery of bandit looters north of Narda made that feasible. Turns out, they have access to a decent drop rate of most runes, in numbers great enough to attempt the mage training arena. I was also able to snag a mithril helm upgrade in the process. The beginner wand, a tier 45 one-handed mage weapon, requires 30 kinetic, 30 alchemist, 300 enchantment, and 30 graveyard pizzazz points. I would require a steady supply of both catalytic and elemental runes at this point, as my access to other elemental staves were limited with my current Slayer level. But the bandit loots provided just enough runes to unlock the first tier of wand. I will come back later after I unlock Ali's rune shop and more consistent runes. In the next clip, you'll see an inventory of hunter urns. Hunter training will be very important, as many unique items can be obtained only from implants. However, consistent training can only be achieved at 500 for access to golden warblers. I know that a big Chinchapa spawn was located in the desert. The odds of finding one was limited. So I decided to use the 1 token XP from adding runes to urns to grind to 500. I soon realized, however, that I did not have consistent access to mud runes, and a much easier method was discovered, but it would provide some great early crafting levels regardless. With 30 woodcutting, I decided to leave the desert to collect my required items that I was allowing for the quests, mainly the willow log, bucket of sap, earmuffs, and face mask. I was hoping that I could obtain the Slayer items from Simona herself, but unfortunately she won't sell you anything until the completion of the Smoking Kills quest, which is the quest that I needed the items for in the first place anyway. This journey also brought me to Catherby, which is where I found the tree sap and the willow logs to be used for the quest. Upon collection of these items, I returned to the desert to complete Ichthurin's Little Helper, a prerequisite quest for Smoking Kills. This gave some decent XP, especially in agility, which is very difficult to train at this time. I also started Contact for the next episode. We finally started to wrap up the level requirements for Spirits of the Elid, first with mining, and then with thieving. There are also a few clips of minor gear upgrades. Imphide was used to make a full set of tier 10 mage gear by world hopping to find imps, along with an Imphide book to pair with my new wand. Unfortunately, this meant that my offhand damage was still capped at tier 10. Some iron, crush, and stab weapons were created to help fight the golems in the upcoming quest. With everything ready, the quest began. The quest seemed very anticlimactic considering the grinding required, but it did provide some nice prayer XP, not much closer to protection prayers. After finally accessing better food, the real fun can begin. In the next episode, I will use this food to complete the Smoking Kills and Contact quests, giving access to my only Slayer Master and Karis, the Bane of Calphites.